Welcome to the Mobile Hunter podcast and the series Psyche of a Hunter. I'm your host, Rick Cates. And tonight we are sitting down with one of my favorite guests that we've had on the podcast a couple of different times, Mr. Derek Craig of New Day Outdoors. Derek, how's it going?
It's going great up here in northern Indiana, freezing our what's off here tonight. So I looked at
It's
my phone earlier and it said it was -3 currently. So
oh
that's where
my
we're at
gosh.
tonight.
Yeah, we are at 3 degrees here in the northern part of Kentucky, and I saw our friends in Florida in the south got a nice dusting today as well.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, we don't have much snow, but man, it is as cold as it gets right now for us. So
Yeah,
yep.
it's pretty brutal.
Yeah,
We
it's
haven't had,
rough.
I was talking about this with someone the other day, in terms of being outdoors and that kind of stuff, and it's I cannot remember a year, at least around here, where we've had temps this cold in a long time.
Mhm.
I'm hopeful. Fingers crossed that it kills some of the ticks off.
Oh,
it,
it's
it would be
it's
such
got
a
it's got to
blessing.
kill. It has to kill something. So it's funny. I let out both my dogs. Both of my dogs are. I've got two labs, and they're going stir crazy right now because they like spending time outside during the day, running around and all this. And they're just my one's just in my face constantly because she's going nuts. But I let them out earlier today. My one lab went out to go to the bathroom and ventured too far out in the yard, and the ground is so frozen and so cold. As she's walking back, she's stopping and she's picking up a paw, and then she put it down, pick up another. I mean, it's so cold it was hurting her paws even. So
Oh
yeah,
my
it's
goodness.
pretty rough out there. So
Jeez, Pete.
yeah,
Well, let's. I mean, it's going to get to a balmy 25 degrees here tomorrow, so I'll
it's
be
gonna it'll feel tropical. So
it'll feel tropical. So, for those of you that have listened to our last episode that we did, not the ATA episode, but the one prior to that, the first episode of Psyche of a Hunter, you'll know that we've changed the format a little bit, but also the basis of Psyche of a Hunter or Anatomy of a Miss originally was to talk to guys who had experiences in the woods where they shot a deer or shot and missed a deer, or shot and didn't recover a deer, and how they recovered from that, and kind of breaking down the hunts themselves and understanding themselves as a hunter a little bit. So, Derek, for those of you who don't know, Derek, can you give a little bit of a background for yourself in the hunting industry and kind of, what you typically go after and things along those lines?
yeah, of course. Yeah. So for those who don't know me, Derek Craig, I own a company called New Day Outdoors Productions. And it's been an actual business for 15 years or so, but I'm in my mid 50s. I'm 55. I've got two adult age daughters. They're 23 and 25. They both grew up hunting. My youngest is still pretty ate up with it, which is pretty awesome. um Married my wife now for over 30 years, and we live in Northeast Indiana. I say all that. I didn't grow up hunting. Didn't come from a hunting family. Got into it, was introduced in late high school. Then after I graduated college, then things really took off. So I've been bow hunting for 30-ish years, and I would say like hardcore diehard bow hunting for the last of those 30 years, of the last 24, 25 years or so.
Hmm.
I still do gun hunt a little bit and all that. So anyway, so I love to bow hunt. I don't know, 16, 17, 18 years ago, something like that. When my oldest daughter started hunting, I was like, man, I'm a dad. I want to film this stuff. So bought a camera, just a cheap camera, and then also, and started recording hunts. Well, also I'm actually a mechanical engineer. And so the engineering mindset is, I'm very analytical. I'm very OCD. When I dive into something, I typically dive in head first and get in over my head real fast. And for me, the best way to get out of that is to just keep diving deeper down that rabbit hole. So I say all that because then the filming, just like for me, just shooting something on a cheap camcorder of me and my daughter wasn't enough. So it all morphed and progressed over time to doing, hunting videos and content. And when I started doing this, that was a time when traditional TV was coming kind of off of its heyday, but you didn't have what we have now, and that, everything now is YouTube. I mean, YouTube was just starting. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it literally, I joined YouTube, I think it was about 2010. I set up my account for my business. And it had literally, like a year or so before that, had transitioned away from being a dating app.
Yep.
YouTube was originally a dating app into, maybe it was a year and a half or so. So it was so new, so new. Anyways, so we didn't have, the TikToks, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, you didn't have reels and all this stuff and everything. And so I just started producing content and throwing it out there. And one thing led to another. And through all that process, met a gentleman by the name of Mike Somm, who owns Magnus Broadheads. And at the time, he was developing the bullheads, which are the head choppers for turkeys. And I was bow hunting turkeys and frustrated, and had tried the guillotine product, which was the thing that had 4 blades and straws.
Yep.
And I'm not knocking that product. We didn't know at that time how to make those types of heads fly like we do now. And met Mike, and we got talking. He's like, "You're an engineer and you're bow hunting turkeys and all this." And next thing you know, it morphed into some relationship that here we are in 2025 is still going on strong. And so, I do a lot of design, R&D, tech support for him, media, production work. I'm his right-hand man on basically everything. He actually jokes anymore. He's like, "You are the face of Magnus." And I'm like, "No, buddy, you are. It's your company." But so it's been fun. And then that just like morphed into other avenues in the hunting industry. I've worked with a bunch of companies over that 15-ish or so year period, or of time. Lots of companies, big names, Dave Smith Decoys, up until Dave and Brad and Greg sold it to Meat Eater. A lot of companies, Sitka for a while. I was with that. I was the Athens archery guy.
You were the Athens archery guy.
I was in the catalogs. I was in the magazines. When you bought an Athens bow, my face was hanging on the tag of the bow. So I did a lot of their production work. I filmed for TV shows. Currently, I try and keep my partnerships kind of very limited. They're not pro staff. There's no pro staff BS with me.
Right.
These are all, I work in the industry. I'm paid by these companies. But right now, I mean, it's Magnus Broadheads. It's Huntworth Clothing. I've been with them for a couple of years now. And there's some really cool stuff beyond what everybody sees me do for them that's coming out next year. So
I can't wait.
That's pretty awesome. Hot Shot from Hot Shot Archery, which is releases and all that. And then Spy Point Cameras is kind of a new one. And it's going okay. I mean, right now it's kind of a low level photography gig with them, and we'll see where it goes from here. So they're good. I've been using their cameras for years. And so anyway, so that's kind of my role. It's just morphed over time. I produce content on YouTube, and I love filming hunts. I'm ate up with it. I don't even remember what it's like to go to the field and hunt without a camera, So whether it's deer, turkeys, I used to waterfowl hunt a lot. That I really didn't film a lot. That's a little more challenging in the self-filming role. So, but yeah, that's kind of my background and where I'm at. Again, I bow hunt 90% of my whitetail hunting is bow hunting. I take a rifle or muzzleloader occasionally, but it's all bow hunting. So
yeah. Well, good deal. Thanks for giving the background there. So
yeah, I hope I sped it up fast.
No, dude, completely fine. So bow hunting. That was the reason that this whole thing came to kind of a head for me, and why the series is created is that anyone who's listened to any of the episodes is that I am not the world's greatest archer. I picked up a bow 8-9 years ago. I think 9 years ago at this point. I just bought my second bow last year, and the thing that I go over with everybody with regards to this stuff is, and it took me a long time to understand it, is that bow hunting's not gun hunting, and that's not to say gun hunting's easy. But like most people grow up gun hunting, and you have a lot more practice with a gun. and you're likely to miss less when you practice more with stuff. Anatomy of a Miss was born out of the idea that I missed a deer. I think I talked about this on the last one. I missed a deer 4 years ago that still haunts me. It would have been the biggest deer I've ever shot in my life. And after that point, I blamed everything. I blamed everything except myself. And it finally boiled down to, Rick, damn it, if you're gonna like complain about this stuff, you better figure out why you're doing it. And I figured out, like, I wasn't practicing, I wasn't using the right equipment, I wasn't doing the right things, all things that were within my control. And since that point, I really dove into the reality that these are things that affect people long term. I thought, like, I can't be the only guy who's ever shot a deer or shot and missed a deer and it's affected him in some way. So fast forward, we create this series, and last year we go over some hunts with some people. But the reason I have you on today is because you had a saga that happened 2 years ago that was just gut wrenching. Like, it was rough. Like, I've known you now for, I think, 4 years at this point. And like, I wanted to have you on here to tell this story because there's kind of this full arc that happens with it, and it's an important thing I feel like people need to hear. So I'd like, Derek, if you could, to take us back to, I guess it's 2023 at this point, right?
Well, it's 2022 when it all went
2022.
down.
So 2022.
Yeah, because
So
man, we're at 2025. Man, it's crazy because it feels, honestly, I mean, the whole thing feels like it was yesterday, and the wounds from it run deep, and it did have, somewhat of a happy ending, not quite as happy of ending as I wanted, but yeah. So yeah, but real quick to set all that up, you were talking about, you missed your first deer. I remember in my earlier days of bow hunting, I wouldn't say it was the first year I missed, but I'm gonna go back probably 20 or more years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was opening day here in Indiana, and I was sitting along a swamp, and about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, I see a small buck coming, and he's a little 6-pointer, and I see a bigger body deer coming behind it. And at the time, this deer behind it was probably the biggest buck I'd ever seen on the hoof. And ended up, real fast forward,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't kill the deer. He did get killed later on the season by a guy with a muzzle loader, if I recall. And I want to say he was in the mid 150s. Now, back then, I'd never seen a deer. I still haven't killed a deer that big. I've killed some nice deer, but nothing like
Mm-hmm.
that. But he came in and he beds down at like 8 in the morning, like 60 yards from me. And I sat there in the stand all day. This is, of course, you don't have cell phones back then. You don't have a way to tell my wife, what's going on. And probably at that time we had at least one, if not two, of our kids. Anyways, and so I, like 1 in the afternoon, the little one stands up, comes over and feeds underneath me, and the big one gets up and he feeds over, and man, he's standing there broadside, and this is pre-laser rangefinders. I had something called a ranging rangefinder, and it looked like a remote control, like a rectangular remote control for your TV. It was very
Mm-hmm.
like, if you held it on your side, it was wide and thin, and you'd look in one end, and there was this dial, and I can't remember, something about, you would like focus it, and when you did, that would tell you on an indicator the range. They were made for like golf.
Yeah.
So I remember being so nervous, shaking, I couldn't operate it. And so I draw back, and I think he's 20 yards, and I shoot right under it. And he was actually, in hindsight, after I paced it off later in the day, he was maybe 30. He kind of goes around a tree, and next thing you know, I think he's 30, he's 40. I shoot under him a second time, and then he kind of bounds off, and like 10 minutes later, he goes down by the swamp, and he takes a drink, and I missed him a third time.
Oh, wow.
I missed his deer 3 times after I'd stood in a tree all day. So, so when you think about missing a deer, like, that was early on, and I'd missed other deer before that, but that was like my first time of like, oh wow, like I really screwed up a big opportunity. And I didn't think I didn't realize the magnitude of it at the time, but years later you look back on and think about all the different things you could have done and all this. And obviously we didn't have the technology we have today. I wasn't experienced. I mean, today I'd like to think he'd be a dead deer. And I typically rub misses off, I get over misses pretty quickly, and it really didn't bother me a lot. But it's funny when you start hearing people talking about misses, and I go, yeah, I missed the same deer 3 times in the span of 15 minutes or less. I mean, so I mean those things sting, and when you move on through your hunting career, you remember those incidents. You remember a doe that you yanked a shot and shot over. I've obviously lost deer. I mean, you do this long enough, you're going to lose some deer, and just hopefully it's not a big buck. And knock on wood, I had never lost a big buck until 2022. But anytime you lose a deer, a doe, any deer of any sort, it stings. You got to move on. Heck, I mean, I gut shot one this year on accident. I was out in Missouri, yanked the shot, gut shot it, let it lay as a doe, let it lay overnight, came back the next morning, coyotes get it and all that. It's like, I mean, it stings. It stings. And I'm not trying to, I mean, but the older I get, I hate seeing them suffer and you hate seeing that. But I've also learned that you better not dwell on it, because if you dwell on it, it will ruin your season. And I mean, it's fine to be pissed for an afternoon or a day or two or whatever, but the best thing you can do when you talk psyche is to move on. And those are a lot of lessons that I learned from this incident that we'll talk about in 2022. So anyway, so setting the stage for that. So anyway, so 2022, going into that year, that was so I had actually won the film contest down there at you guys at your expo.
Yeah, you did.
And stuff. and man, I'll tell you, that was after that I scored the deal with Athens and all this, and everything was just lining up going into that season. I was like, man, the dreams are just, everything's really, really, hitting on all cylinders. And you almost felt there was a little bit of cockiness going into the season, probably. I'd say there definitely was some cockiness going into the season, and there was some humble pie that needed to be eaten. And so going in that season, I don't run a lot of cameras usually I don't break out my cameras usually till mid-August, early September. Well, I got out the trail cameras, and I had this really, really nice 8-pointer, tall tines, long beams that wrapped around, very identifiable with the way that his G2s in particular curled out over his rack. The ends of his main beams kind of had a bladed kind of look to him. Just a cool deer. And I didn't, it was one of those deers where I'm a sucker for 130-inch deer. I mean, that's why I've never shot a 150s deer or 160 deer. I mean, I'm a sucker for it. I love it, especially if the cameras are rolling. And it was one of those deer, I'm like, boy, I think he's only 3.5, and I probably ought to just let him go. But I was ate up with him. I kept getting photos of him and all this. And so we have, in the farm that he was living on is what we call our reduction zone here in Indiana. We have these reduction zone areas. Think of them like as an urban type of zone.
Okay.
Some places have, okay?
Yeah.
So we have them around cities. We have them along highways, toll roads, stuff like that here in Indiana. And I have one that I've been hunting this property now 28 years. And for the first 20 years, it was just a property. And when they changed the rules, it looks like I won a lottery ticket and it fell in the zone. Well, that allows seasons to open earlier. You got to earn a buck. You have to shoot a doe first, and then it opens up.
Okay.
Buck. You get a second buck tag then. You'll get a buck tag for that zone. So now in a 1-buck state, I can shoot 2 bucks. So it's a luxury. So I get really excited about it. So I'm getting pictures of this buck. I had a couple decent bucks on a couple of my other properties that I own. And, so I'm thinking, okay, yeah, he's probably 3.5, but man, I just know me. I'm not going to be able to pass this buck up if, he comes by me. So I'm getting I'm getting pictures so regular of this deer that I was joking with a buddy of mine. And again, there was some arrogance. I'm like, I can tell you what he's going to do every day. And I mean, it was getting pretty close to that. It really was. And so I went in on September 15th. I'm like, I got to knock out a doe. And I think it wasn't the first sit, but it was either the second or third sit. I got in there the first 2 or 3 days, and I shoot a doe, get it done. Boom. Okay, now I got this buck tag opened up. And he was, in all of my years of hunting and running trail cameras, I've never, ever, ever had a buck where I could basically predict what he was going to do. I mean, 7 days in a week, I bet 5 days I could have predicted every day, and on 5 days I'd have been dead nuts right. I mean, he was just so patternable, and he was running around with these 3 younger bucks as well, and they were always together. And there was an evening, it was in late September, or it was an afternoon in late September, and I had hunted that morning and didn't see him. I'd seen him a number of times, but I was kind of just staying off, working the fringes, seeing, waiting for the right conditions to make my move. And there was a late September, I think it was. I had hunted that morning, but had something to do. And about like 10:30, 11 o'clock that morning, I get a trail camera picture of him. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go kill him tonight. She's like, go do it. And I went that night, and man, I came so stinking close to killing him that night. He came out in a corner. I knew right where he went and bedded. I knew right what he was going to do. I knew he was going to feed in the corner of this bean field. And I expected him coming in this out tighter into the corner. That's what he'd been doing. And he came out about, I'm going to say 50, 55, 60 yards further up the tree line, and came into the bean field, and he fed for quite a while. And one of those things I just filmed him, took photos of him, and I thought, okay, we're getting closer. We're getting closer. Yeah. So, so you sat there and kind of, waited a few more days and all this stuff. And then, it was October, so early October gets here, and it's like the 2nd or so. So the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, I remember it was 3 days in a row. I got pictures of him and his 3 buddies all entering this food plot of mine.
Okay.
Every evening, and they always came into that food plot about 2 hours before the end of legal light. Like, they were going in early, and they were just sitting in there and gorging all. And I was just waiting on the right wind and condition, because this food plot's hard. It's kind of hard to hunt with a bow. It's got a tree in the middle of it, which is amazing, but you've got to have the exact wind to hunt that tree. If not, your options, I have a box blind, 8 box blinds. I hate them. In fact, I'm selling both of mine this winter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm over them, completely over them. Anyways, I don't enjoy hunting out of them. So that's kind of like the box blind has always been the, like, okay, that's the Mark Drury, get it done, doesn't damn the wind, just do it type of situation. And I just don't enjoy them. I just don't enjoy hunting out of them. I've figured out some other ways to hunt it since this time. So I think it was the 5th. It was October. I know it was October 5th. It was the day that I actually shot the deer. And I think it was lunchtime that day. I had stopped in and saw my wife at her office. And I said, the box blind, the perfect wind for the box blind was a south wind. And the food plot is south of the box blind. And I hate the box blinds, but I wanted to kill this deer when I knew exactly what he was going to do. And I went in, I saw my wife at lunch, and I said, in the next 3 days, I will kill that deer. That was on October 5th. She's like, okay. And I said, I'm going hunting tonight. I think we had like south winds projected for the next 3 days.
Okay.
So I'm going hunting tonight. She's like, okay. So I jump in my truck, and I head over to where I hunt, and I get there, and I get all my gear on, and I look on the floor of my backseat of my truck, and my bino harness is not there. And my bino harness is my binos, which I really don't need.
Mm-hmm.
My rangefinder, which is nice to have, but I found that I know the ranges on everything. But most importantly, the release for my bow.
Oh no.
Kids at home. So I jump in my truck, I race home, I get it. So I always had this joke, and if this happened in my buck this year, and I filmed it and set it on camera, and then basically did the Babe Ruth call your shot type of thing on my buck this year. I'm a firm believer in things always happen when everything else is going to hell. Okay, like when you've screwed up and you've made a bonehead move, that's when things happen. Or you've got something big to do. You got a meeting to be at or whatever, and that's when you're going to kill a buck and be like, crap, now what do I do? Okay. So here I am. It's total chaos. Like, shit, now I got to run clear home. So I jump in my truck. I drive clear home, grab my bino harness, turn around, race back. I'm watching the clock because I know that he and his buddies been coming out at about 2 hours before sunset, or end of legal time, whatever it was. I had about a 2-hour window, but it's closing,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to get there, get in this line, let things calm down. So I'm racing. I'm just pissed about everything because I'm going to blow my opportunity. I just know it. And, I get in there, I get in the blind, get settled in. I don't think I'd been there half an hour. And I look out into the thick stuff and I see a little buck. Here comes one. And I'm like, immediately, I put the binos up. I knew exactly what deer it was. It was one of his little buddies. He comes in the food plot, feeds for 3-4 minutes. Here comes the other one of his other little buddies. Here comes the third little buddy. They kind of came in together. They're feeding. I'm like, all right, he's going to be here. Just wait. I don't know, maybe like 5 minutes goes by. And he just magically appears out of the brush, walks across the grass opening, comes up to the food plot. He's quartering away. He's eating. I'm filming. I'm ranging him. I'm 31 yards, 31 yards, 31 yards every time.
Oh man.
Which that 30 to 35 yard range is a dicey situation in deer, in my opinion. It gives them a lot of time to react. And here's the thing, I had probably 2 hours to work with.
Mm-hmm.
But this is where a good buck messes with you. I can't imagine what a 180 buck would do to your head.
Oh my gosh.
So he finally gets done kind of eating, quartering to me, and he turns broadside and he starts walking across the plot. And there's a little tree in the middle of the plot that's a little scrape tree. He's going to go behind it. Well, I went into full panic mode. I'm like, and again, hindsight, I should just let him go behind it. He's going to pop out the other side, or he's going to turn around, come back in. These deer don't know I'm there. They're there. They've been there the last few evenings. There's no rush.
Mm-hmm.
No, me and my infinite wisdom. I scream at him. He stops. And now he's on full alert. I'm at full draw. I look down. I got him in the camera frame. Squeezed it off. Watched him duck. And watched that arrow bury into his shoulder.
Ugh.
Really hot. He did the where they drop and roll away.
Yep.
Which I've had many bucks do. A lot of times you end up with a spine shot, in that situation. But he did the drop and roll. And he charged off, arrow hanging out of him. I'm like, I can't believe it. I just, at that time, I thought I killed him. I mean, I buried half that arrow shaft through him. Like, there's going to be a dead deer. Takes off, goes across. He stops. I watch him for a little bit. He takes off across the beams, just kind of jogging across. I'm like, all right, I'm going to find him on the other side of hill and beans. Get down. I think I found 2 drops of blood.
Ugh.
Found where he snapped my arrow off. When he went out of the across, there's a little tree line from the food plot to the field where he hit something, snap the arrow off, pick the arrow up. All right, go back, give him time, all this stuff. Got looking at other arrows, and he had like 12 or 13 inches of arrow in him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was in him. It didn't come out the other side. It was in him. And so I'm like, I'm convinced. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to watch the footage. I'm looking at the footage. Like, I don't know, man. I mean, this is one of those where it either slid right under the spine and caught like the tops of the lungs, or it slid right over the top of the spine. I don't know. It's, you're just looking at it, sending pictures off, or frame shot, screen grabs off to buddies of mine.
Yeah.
Some are going, yep, I think if you let him lay, you'd be good. Others are going, no, dude, it's too high. Went back. I decided to leave him overnight. Didn't even go look. Went back the next morning. Grid searched everything. Couldn't find him. Called a buddy of mine that I know I've used one time to help me find one of my daughter's deer. He's got a great dog. We ran the dog. Couldn't find him. Just absolutely sick. Here's a deer that I knew so well.
Mm-hmm.
And basically tried to Babe Ruth call my shot on it, and was arrogant enough to think that, I was going to get it done. And again, the kind of thing when you look back on this is should have slowed my roll that night. He wasn't going to go anywhere. I knew he wasn't going to go anywhere. You don't always know that. I mean, they're deer.
Right.
But he probably wasn't. And if he did, who cares? This was October 5th. They didn't know I was there.
Right.
Chances are there would have been another opportunity, especially being how regular he was. I mean, yeah. So anyway, at the advice of the my buddy who's got the dog, is put out trail cameras. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time I had like 7 cell cams, and I put them at all different points on this 180 some acre property. That's really not a lot of woods. I mean, on that, you say 180, there's like 25 acres maybe totals of ditch bottom trees and swamps and stuff like that on this property. It's mostly ag. So put him in all the areas, the funnels, the places where I knew he was, or that I know that deer just like to be.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing for about 10 days. I think it was 10 days, 10 or 11 days. And then he showed up on camera again. So here we are. We confirmed that he's still alive. And not only did I get pictures of the entrance side where you can see the wound, but I got pictures of what would be the exit side.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no hole there, but what there was a big old bulge under the skin. And that was the broadhead.
Oh my gosh.
That was the broadhead. And
so you buried an arrow 12 inches in this deer. 10 days later, you get pictures of him, and there's a visible bulge on the other side that you can say, like,
in his left. Yeah. And it was low enough in his left shoulder where you go, well, dang, how in the world did this not clip a lung or something? And maybe it did. I mean, it may have gone under the spine and just clipped the top of a lung. I do not believe in a void or a no man's land. If anybody ever says that there's some magical space between the bottom of the spine and the organs, there isn't. Look, I'm not a medical guy. Okay. I'm not Zach Kaiser. Okay. But I can tell you, I'm pretty analytical as an engineer. I know enough stuff. There's not a void there. So I don't know. Maybe there was, maybe there was. I was using a fixed head. It was a Magnus Black Hornet. Look, I'm a big proponent of fixed heads, but that's an 1.25 inch head. I mean, maybe, who knows? Maybe the way it went through, the blade was like level with, his spine, and maybe it was just one of the little bleeders, maybe just nicked the tops of his lungs. I don't know. Don't know. We'll never know. Maybe if I'd used a mechanical that's got a 2.5 inch, who knows? I don't know. I don't know. I screwed up. The equipment didn't screw up. The broadhead didn't screw up. Nothing. I screwed up. So anyway, so I can see the bulge. So then over the course of, that was 10 days. be the 15th. So over the course of the next 10-ish days to 12 days, something like that, he kept showing back up on camera.
Oh.
And I was trying, and I went out, I did hunt quite a bit, but the thing, he was showing back up on camera, but not as frequently and not in his old patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
he would just show up and I'm like, well, I've never seen him down there before. Like, so I would hunt the areas that I felt like, I had the highest probability, pinch points, travel spots, this and that, thinking that, if I could get in a pinch point near a bedding area, I would catch him coming out late in the day or going back or whatever. Well, I started getting more, these pictures of him. And the funny thing is after like day 10 or 12, the bulge became a broadhead.
Oh,
It
it worded all the way
literally,
through.
I have trail camera pictures. You can see the broadhead starting to, and some of the last pictures I've got, you can clearly see there is what appears to be a broadhead that's hanging out. That
Oh,
arrow was
wow.
built in that deer. So I'm like, man, I'm gonna get this deer. I mean, he's gonna probably heal up and all this stuff. So I remember it was October. It was October 28th or 29th. My daughter was home from college and it was a Friday night. She came home and she wanted my wife and I to take her to dinner. And I was like, I'm looking at the weather going, man, this would be the perfect night. Gosh, this would be the perfect night for this one spot. It would be a perfect night. But, I mean, this is where, family's more important. We went to
Mm-hmm.
dinner and see my daughter in a few weeks, go to dinner. And sure enough, we're sitting at dinner and he shows up on camera in the spot that I would have hunted that night.
Oh,
I
man.
had two different cameras. He shows up there. So anyway, so he's there. Then I got pictures of him back in my food plot the next night, laying in front of one of my cell cameras, bedded down. I say all that because after that, I never got another photo of the deer. Ever.
So at that point, we're talking, you're getting into prime time, like of the year. Like you're getting to like late October.
The last photos I got were, I would think dinner was a Friday night. It was either 28th or 29th. And then I got pictures of him that next day and that was it. So we're prime time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, everything goes into, which already everything had gone into that deer. And now I have another buck tag and I did punch another buck tag on a buck that quite honestly I shouldn't have shot, but I shot him because I felt that I needed to do something with my season. I wish, I mean, it's fine. He's a fine deer, but I shouldn't have shot him. I should have let him go. But anyways, so I basically put everything I had into finding this deer and killing this deer. I mean, I obsessed about it. I lost sleep. I was sick. The whole time, the whole month of October after I shot him, I was sick. I mean, it was one of those, it's like, okay, do you hang it up and just say, screw it, I don't want to hunt, but I'm like, no, I've got to go find this deer. I mean, I have to find this deer. I have to finish this. And so I was ate up with it. So I hunted. And again, this is a reduction zone. So not only does it open till on September 15th, regular deer season in Indiana, bow season ends. Usually it's always the first Sunday of January. So whatever that is, early. Well, reduction zone goes to the 31st of January.
Oh, okay.
So I can hunt this deer and I can hunt with a rifle clear through that if I need to. And I was at the point, like, I want this deer, especially if I would see him and find out he was, visibly really suffering, I mean, I just want to put him down. Nothing, dude. I invested so much time, over hunted the property to the point for the month of January. I think in all my sits in the month of January, I saw one deer in all my sits, and it was just a doe.
Really?
I mean, I put so much, the whole thing, this deer, between the deer and it was my screw up of the deer. It was like I couldn't even think straight. I was hunting at the dumbest times, hunting, overpressuring stuff. Just, it was stupid. It was absolutely dumb in retrospect. So yeah, so the season ends and I never had another picture of him. And I'm like, well, what the hell? And I'm I know a lot of people. Nobody's seen him. I've walked the property a gazillion times. I know the property like the back of my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't know what's going on. So I
So
lost the
this,
deer.
yeah, so you lost the deer. Season ends, and I mean, I can remember talking to you during this time. It was rough.
Yeah, it
Um,
sucked.
I mean, I remember the initial pictures. I remember that
Yeah.
season, and I felt sick for you because, like, I know, like, I mean, you're a very ethical hunter. You do everything you can to recover deer. You do everything you can to put a good shot on them. And when it doesn't happen, like I think you're like most guys who are that way, where you're so tore up about the fact that you haven't found it, and you exhaust every possible
Oh yeah.
ounce of wit and mind to be able to go find the deer.
Yeah.
And ends it's the season ends,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like,
Yeah. Well, and two is, you know, if you miss a deer, you miss a deer.
right.
If you gut shot a deer, if you gut shoot a deer, you know it's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
You don't find the deer. Okay, it's tough to swallow, but you know that that's the outcome of that deer.
Yep.
If you graze the brisket of a deer or something like that, and when you come to terms with that, you know that deer's going to live. Okay.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, that sucks. I wounded a deer. I missed it. Deer, I mean, they don't feel pain like we do. I mean, you
Right.
graze me in the brisket with an arrow and it's going to be a life-changing event. But for them, it's whatever. And again, I've just gotten to the point where you move on. But this is a case where I ran an arrow through a deer.
Yep.
He's got 12 inches of arrow roughly and a broadhead still in him working through his skin. Like the whole time I'm feeling bad because this deer, I know it's got to hurt like hell. Like, I
Yep.
mean, it's got to be infected. It's got to be, and it tore me up, man. It was bad. It was bad. And so I thought, well, maybe, maybe he'll shed out. Maybe he died. Maybe I'll find him in looking for sheds. Never did. Never did. Start going into the 2024 season. No pictures of him. Nothing on that farm that I even really wanted to chase. Um, Ended up having where I live, I had an amazing buck on camera.
Mm-hmm.
And decided, well, that's going to be my regular tag. And what I'm going to do on that reduction zone is, in the off chance that this buck is still alive somewhere or something else is, decent, then fine. It took me a long time to get kind of over it. Going to 2024 season or 2023 season,
Mm-hmm.
and October 19th rolls around and I'm behind my house and I shoot the biggest deer I've ever killed with a bow, which was my target buck that I
Yeah.
had here at the house, which is one we did a podcast on that, I
Yep.
think, a year or so ago. Gorgeous deer. Love that deer. Was so happy with it. And honestly, I mean, this deer from 2022, I mean, he's in the back of your mind, but at this point, you're just not really thinking about it much. You're
Mm-hmm.
over it. Like, what the hell can you do? And season's rolling, and I'm still trying to find a decent deer to shoot and chase. And it got to be, I think it was in early December. And my wife and I we had actually gone out to lunch one day on a weekend, and there's a little Amish town from us. They got all these Amish shops. My wife wanted to stop in a couple of shops there. That's very Freudian, huh? Couple of shops, and my phone rings, and it's an Amish guy on the phone, and I knew the guy. I'd met him before, and he leases some ground across the road from me. He's like, yeah, he goes, my son shot a doe, went over across the road on your property. It went over onto another buddy of mine, Bob. We'll call him Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Bob's property, and then we tracked it over, got to your property. One there to want to know if we can go find it. I'm like, yeah, go. I'm not hunting. Go. I don't care. Whatever. Go do it. Didn't think anything about it. A couple hours go by, and Bob, the first guy that they'd been on his property, he gives me a call and he goes, Derek, he goes, they didn't find that deer. He goes, but they found something else. And I was like, what's that? And he goes, I'm pretty sure it's your deer from last year. I'm like, nuh-uh. I know. And he go, yeah. He goes, I'm sitting here. He goes, I'm holding the skull.
Wow.
I'm like, nuh-uh. Yeah. He goes, dude, he goes, I'm going to text you a picture right now. I'm on the phone and he sends me a picture. I'm like, holy shit, that's him. And he's
And it
like,
was on your property.
it was literally on the property line
Oh
of
my
between
God.
my property and Bob's. It was literally on the property line. How I never saw it. It was laying in some grass. Don't know. So I was like, holy shit, Bob. I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, can I come by and see it? And he goes, I said, can I come by tomorrow and see it? And he goes, dude, he goes, it's your deer. You can have it. I'm like, are you sure? He goes, it's not my deer. He goes, this is your deer, buddy. He goes, you can have it. I'm like, okay. So, I call the Amish guy right away and I'm like, I heard you found a big buck. Where'd you find it? He told me exactly where he found it. And I'm like, I know exactly where you're talking about. And I thanked him. I'm like, dude, like a lot of people, man, there's a lot of people, whether they're shady or not, man, they see a decent buck laying around or a shed antler laying around, they'll
Yep.
pick it up and just keep on going. And he could have. He could have. I hope to think that I would have done what he did, and he did. He picked it up and he took it over to Bob. It's like, hey Bob, I found this right by the property line. Here you go. I mean, he had to go out of his way to go to Bob's house to give it to him.
I was going to say,
And which is pretty impressive. And I thanked him. I told him, I'm like, dude, you ever need anything, you let me know. I mean, seriously, yeah, just let me know. Whatever you need. I couldn't believe it. I was very grateful. So anyway, I contacted a conservation officer buddy of mine. I said, hey man, I was like, I explained the situation. He's like, he goes, I can't do it because call up another one, which I ended up knowing the guy actually. And he goes, he'll meet you over at Bob's house and he'll get you a tag for it and everything. So I don't think Bob could actually meet the next day. It was like 2 days later.
mm-hmm.
I go over to Bob's house and the CO's there and there it was. I was like, holy shit. Like, I can't believe it. I mean, to the point where I'm standing there with another Bob who's my age and a CO, and I'm like, don't freaking cry, man. Don't cry. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. I mean, dude, I was like, it was emotional.
I was
Like,
going to say that
it was emotional. Very
that's got
emotional.
to be super emotional. I mean, you're talking
Yeah.
about closing the loop on this thing almost 1 year later from the
Yeah.
point and from when this all happened. What do you think ended up happening? Because you have this deer on camera. How, like, was it farther away from where you were at, where you were thinking that he was going to be? What in your mind started going through it?
As far as like why he died or how or what do you mean?
Like I mean, you said he bedded down, he had the arrow sticking out of him. Do you think he just like went over to this area? Was it like thick cover and he just laid down and died, or
I don't know, because I ended up going to the spot where they found the head, and I asked him, I was like, where's the spot? And he's telling me, I said, I want to know because I want to go see the skeleton.
mm-hmm.
Because I wanted to see if I could see a hole through, say, a scapula, or maybe the arrow's still kind of laying there, and see if there was any way I could piece it. I know it's over a year later, but is there any way you can piece together what happened? He goes, dude, all there was a head. So
wow.
I'm like, BS. Like, okay, whatever. You just didn't see the skeleton. Maybe the skeleton's 10 yards away
Mm-hmm.
and something dragged the head over. I went to where it was, and I mean, I dissected every blade of grass trying to find a bone and couldn't.
Wow.
And so I don't know, man. Part of me wants to think that, yeah, maybe there was a clip in the very top of the lungs and maybe infection and all that stuff, and he just finally laid down somewhere, over there and died. And the coyotes, there are a lot of coyotes around there. Obviously, they chewed on him and something drug his head off for a ways. And
mm-hmm.
I got him, and really there wasn't much damage at all to the antlers. I mean, there's a little bit of chew marks on the main beams, but yeah, he's a beautiful deer. He's actually, if anybody's sitting here who've been watching this, he's this guy right up here over my shoulder.
Beautiful deer, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's so he scores right around 132, and what he's lacking is mass.
Mm-hmm.
If he had the mass of the one that I shot in 2023, he'd have been about, because actually every other thing, measurements all match up. He'd have been probably about in the low 140s. But you can just see there on camera. I mean, he was so identifiable, the way everything curled around, these bladed ends, and
Those bladed
that's
ends,
all
man.
the damage is right there. Is a little bit of chew that you can barely see
Yep.
there on that beam. But here's what's so cool. Look how tight that rack is. The way he comes clear around. And I just absolutely fell in love with him. I got him, one of the little nose bones was missing, so I just pulled the other one off. And then, he'd been laying there and aged, and I do my own euros, and I'm like, it just doesn't look right brightening him up. So I took a flame and I burnt this and just made it look aged and roughed. And,
yeah.
He's a trophy that I call him an 8, but he's actually a 9. I always kind of don't count stuff like this, but anyways, even though it does in the score, but I just for me, he'll always just be a really special deer. And that story, to me, it's just one. What I regret is obviously I filmed everything leading up to the kill and the shoot and the shot.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I really didn't do a lot video wise, because, and then I don't know, I was so obsessed with finding him and hunting him, but I didn't finish the story out. The one thing I regret, because I love telling stories on video, is I really didn't put together a story that really was good to tell. Even when I got him, and part of it too was, you got Bob, you got CO. Like, I didn't want to film all this stuff and everything.
Right.
I didn't want, and I just kind of was like, I guess it's just going to be one of those stories that just kind of lives kind of more in my head than anything. There's video out there when I shot him. There's a video on that, but yeah, the whole story would have been a fun one to video. But yeah, I love the deer. He's pretty cool. He's not a giant, but he was one that I'll never forget, and he'll always be special to me. So
Absolutely.
Anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's a tale of one of those things where, well, like you said, he's not a giant, but he's a deer that I think a lot of guys would be super proud to have. And we've talked about this before, where you get so hyper focused on, like you said, kind of this exchange of like, I've got to do this. Yeah. And there's a lot of guys out there who feel that pressure of, I've got to do this or I've got to do that. Or if this doesn't happen right now, it's not ever going to happen. And sometimes that's true, but I think a lot of times we tell ourselves these things, and we're convincing ourselves of a false narrative that may not actually be there. So that kind of leads into the larger question of this series. You recovered the deer. It sounds like there's this massive moment of relief. It's like weight is just kind of shed off of you. And, I remember like when you found it, we're like all stoked that you this thing is finally kind of like that chapter closes. And you can kind of say like, okay, I know what happened. I know, I have at least the head. I know like general, like where he was at. I might not ever know what happened to him exactly, but I can at least close the book on this. The main line of this series is kind of the hard to swallow pill. What, from this story, or from kind of a grander sense, what is something that you've learned or that you've had to kind of understand about yourself to help you become a better hunter overall, or to help you deal with situations?
Well, the whole the whole finding him, it was so bittersweet because, you know, you're elated that you can finally touch him
Mm-hmm.
and the story's coming to close. But then you sit there and you go back and you think about, man, that deer suffered for who knows? I mean, I definitely know he suffered for the better part of almost 4 weeks after I shot him, and then I quit getting pictures of him. Maybe it was 8 weeks. Maybe it was 12 weeks. I don't know. We won't know. So you start sitting there and playing these games of like, you know, you almost go right back to where you were during that time when you're like, shit, I got a deer that's got an arrow in it, and you're all upset with yourself about it, and then you start reliving it and go, man, I did this to an animal. I don't, you know. For me though, it was a humbling thing. It really was. You know, I've been blessed. I've had a lot of success hunting, whether it's deer, turkeys, and everything. And then all of a sudden, it says our meeting is at the end of the scheduled time.
You're fine. Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, I've had a lot of success, and when some and again, I was coming off that film festival. I landed the Athens deal. All of a sudden, and companies wanting, hey, we want you to come and photo this. I turned down job offers. As wonderful as that sounded, they don't really compete with an engineer's salary, but you know, for filming, editing in the hunting industry as a job. And so, man, you're just rolling, and you're like, man, this is just, I finally have hit it. And then with that comes a, you know, you get a little full of yourself, and sometimes it's good to be humbled. And this deer humbled me bad. I mean, it was a good thing. So, you know, I took a lot away from it. I learned a lot, and one is to be a more humble person, not only when it comes to the deer that I'm hunting, but just as a hunter in general, and in communicating with other hunters and engaging with other hunters at something like your Mobile Hunter Expo.
Yeah.
You know, that it doesn't matter if you're Michael Waddell and you're at the top of the hunting entertainment chain, or Lee Lakowski, or you know, Joe Dirt down here, just some guy who can barely afford to scrounge up, you know, Walmart camo and, you know, a secondhand bow and wants to get out, or you're just any one of us somewhere in between that does whatever. We're all people, and everybody deserves your time, your respect. They deserve you listening to their stories, rather than you just telling them your stories. And there was a lot of that going on. And I think that a lot of us who have worked in this industry, who have had some level of success, have seen some sort of rise. I think that, you know, obviously there's we like others to hear our story. You know, I mean, everybody's sitting here listening to this. Okay.
Yeah.
But to sit down and listen to Rick Cate's story, what I learned from this is you need to be more humble as a hunter and a person who interacts with others in the hunting space, and listen to them. I mean, be genuine, show them that you care. So that was big. When it came to hunting, though, it really made me a little more focused, especially when it comes time for that moment. And granted, we're only 2 seasons past, but I can tell you in 2023, the big buck that I killed right before we found this one, there was a lot of patience involved in that night that all went down, and there was a lot that went into it that, you know, we've discussed in past podcasts of setting up and watching, observing, making adjustments, and striking when it was hot. But when you did strike, there was a lot of like, we got to wait for the right time. And be patient. Don't force it. Don't force the shot. Don't, you know, try and make something happen that's not there. Very similar with my buck that I killed this year. Yeah, my property in southern Indiana is actually that one up there at the top.
Nice buck.
Rack right here. Another 132-inch deer. You know, that one was was challenging myself to work in, at something that was outside my comfort zone. But when the time got there and this deer came in and came down to this little bit of water left in this little drainage that was mostly dry at the time, but there's a little bit. He's drinking and just waiting. I mean, you don't know how many times he's drinking, he's quartering to me, and I'm like, man, I could bury this right in him. I got him at 15 yards. He doesn't know I'm here. I could kill him, and patience, slow down, and putting that into practice. And then, again, on both of those two bucks I just talked about, two back-to-back years, 14, 15-yard shots, incredibly short recovery. You got the memories, you're holding the antlers because you didn't force a situation like I did on that buck up there when I had no reason to force a situation, none whatsoever. There was no reason to gamble on that shot. So, those are some big takeaways for me, and what I learned from it. Also it should have ate me up. I mean, it should have, that I lost it, but also is you can't let it ruin an entire season. And I mean, it pretty much ruined me that entire season. Again, I shot another buck and all that, shot a couple does and everything, but it kind of ruined me for that season. It really did. And it ruined me. I was always a grump around, my wife never knew. It was like, yep, what are you pissed about? And I was thinking about the deer, so I'm pissed, or whatever. Yeah. All this. And life's too short, man. At the end of the day, it's just a deer. And I say that, again, loosely, because you shoot a deer, you don't want to be like, oh, it's just a deer, no big deal. I mean, it was a big deal, but it also is just a deer. This is just deer hunting. I'm reminded anymore every time, Sydney, my youngest, comes home and hunts with me. And, she was home Thanksgiving and Christmas and all that stuff. And we didn't punch a tag. And in fact, there'll be a new video uploaded, be available tomorrow night on that whole process.
Nice.
And I watch it and I actually tear up watching it, because it's more about a tag, punching tags, and more about, deer hunting. It doesn't have to be about killing a deer. And I think we all pretty much are guilty about that. We get on social media, we puff up our chests, we're Billy badasses because we're a public land hunter, or we're a private land hunter, or we're this or we're that. At the end of the day, it's just deer hunting, man.
Yeah.
It's just deer hunting, and there's a lot more important things out there. There really are. I mean, hanging out with your kids, whether they're 2 years old or in my case, 23 years old or whatever, going to dinner with my wife, when it's like, shit, man, this is a pretty good high pressure and wind going on. We got a cold front moving in. But, sometimes, so yeah, the whole thing, really, that deer was a huge wake up call for me. Very humbling. I hope it made me a better person. I know that it made me a better hunter. I've had a frustrating year this year. I mean, I shot a nice buck. I did shoot another doe, that I actually put in the freezer, got shot a doe out in Missouri. But beyond that, it's been a struggle. But I also went outside my comfort zone. I went and hunted public land a bunch this year in Ohio and trying to figure that out, and just doing some other things to like challenge and keep it exciting, and so, not every year is going to be a grand slam, but, it's trying, you stay humble and just figure out ways to have fun. And again, at the end of the day, it's just deer hunting. It's not, I mean, that's all it is. There's just so many other bigger things out there. But
there really is, and I'm glad you kind of come full circle with that, and you come into that perspective, because I've had this conversation multiple times. Is that like people get so engrossed in the idea that like a deer can ruin, like, I mean, literally ruin days, weeks, months, holidays, family time for a lot of people, because it becomes this obsessive thing. And like that's part of, like part of the joy of it is that it's so it's so overwhelming and it's so much fun and all these different things, but also there's the downside of it where you can ruin relationships and stuff over over a deer being missed or something going wrong or like being angry that you can't go out on a certain wind or not really looking at what your priorities should be as a person and really looking at like what matters um most in life in a lot of ways.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. It's yeah, no, yeah. There's so much more that's important, and we're our own worst enemies. All of us
Hmm.
hunters are, and it's just only gotten worse, with social media and all that stuff. And it just, I look at it now, and I remember a younger me when forums were the big thing,
Hmm.
and I know there's still a few of them out there, Archery Talk and stuff like that, but forums were the big thing, and it's just the same as you see in these Facebook groups. Again, I call it the Billy Badass thing. Like, I'm a this hunter, or, I don't like that hunter, and it drives me. My way is the only way. That if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong, and
Yeah.
you're not badass enough. And I remember being in those debates when I was 20 years younger than I am now. But it's just, and I try and avoid it anymore, and I think it's sad, but I think maybe it's just a part of the maturing that we all go through. I mean, heck, I don't know. You start talking to the older generations, and probably back in the 70s and 80s, they probably sat around the coffee shop or the bow shop, and they all
Yep.
bitched at each other because one guy's hunting over a corn pile and the other guy doesn't think that's fair, and another guy he's doesn't, whatever he's got, whatever his take is. And I mean,
I mean,
so
I think you're right with that. I can remember, man, you just brought like a memory up in my head. It wasn't hunting. I remember hearing a guy bitch at another guy one time because he used a Lowrance and he said, that's not real fishing. He,
yeah,
like, I'm not
yeah,
talking about a live scope. I'm talking about like one of the old ones where
yeah,
like with the spooled paper on there. He's like, that's
yeah,
not real fishing. You know where those fish are now. That's not real fishing. And I think it like activates this thing inside our heads of like if you have deemed it unfair or you have deemed it like of something that you don't feel is the right way of doing something, it's like I've got to say something to them about this right now and I'm going to change their mind and they're not going to tell me different. And I don't know that people will ever change that, but I'd like to think at least with this kind of format that we can have stories like this or have people kind of come on here and talk about things along those lines where you tone it down a little bit and you understand that there's a lot more to living and there's a lot more to deer hunting or just being in the outdoors than telling yourself and pounding like that you're the best and pounding your chest on this type of stuff.
yeah, right, yeah, no, definitely, I totally agree. So, and I think some of that's just getting older, and wiser and more mature. I mean, I'm sure I probably sound like my own dad about certain things these days. Probably sound like my grandpa. Things that he said, or on whatever topics. But yeah, I think it's just things you learn, and I just think sometimes you need certain events to give you a wake up call, and at least
Absolutely.
I'm not saying it was a total wake up call, and there's always different things in hunting, but I can tell you that deer right there was, it served as a much needed wake up call that I needed, and you have those lessons occasionally, I mean,
Hmm.
so I'm just glad at the end of the day it worked out, and he's back here hanging on my wall, and I'm still not wondering what the hell ever happened to that deer, because there's been a lot of big bucks that I've seen on the hoof or missed or had trail camera pictures of that you're like, I wonder whatever happened to that thing.
Yep.
It's not very often that it all comes full circle, but
It's not, and it's a good thing when it does. And I think taking the lessons and learning from that is the most important thing you can do from it.
yeah, for sure.
So,
Definitely is, man.
well, I appreciate you sitting down with me tonight, man. I love our talks about this stuff, and we're gonna have to get you back on during turkey season,
Yeah, it's coming up. So yeah,
man.
in fact, I just got a email from Mike, saw him at Magnus today. He's like, sending you some. We pull bullheads off the line and stuff every once in a while. He just sends them. I'm like, well, I better get my turkey bow tuned up and get it ready so I can start shooting, test shots and stuff for him and all that stuff. But yeah, it'll be here before we know it and all that stuff. So yeah, so
good deal, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate you guys having me on, and it's always good seeing everybody. Shameless plug, please go to YouTube, New Day Outdoors, look me up, hit the subscribe button, the bell, all notifications, all the good stuff. No, but seriously, seriously, please go and subscribe. You have no idea. It helps algorithms, and check it out. I've got just a gazillion videos on there over the last 15 years, everything from hunts to gear review stuff, to tech stuff, to my stupid 60 seconds of your life, my Saturdays and Sundays.
I like those. I love those things though. The SNS 60s.
Yeah, there's something for everybody in there and all that. A lot of turkey hunts, a lot of deer hunts. Again, gear reviews, tech stuff, all that. So please go check it out. So
and that'll be in our comment, not in the comment section, but in the section where you can look at what's going on in this episode. I'll make sure to put the link in there. So, well,
great, man.
Well, guys, this has been Psyche of a Hunter, a mobile hunter podcast series, and I've been joined tonight by Derek Craig of New Day Outdoors. Derek, thanks again.
Thanks much, man. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, and we'll talk to you later, guys. Bye.